Hello, my name is Ross Hainsworth. This is the 22nd of December 2011 at approximately 5:30 p.m. I wish to read an affidavit that I filed in the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. This affidavit of mine was sworn on March the 14th, 2011, concerns the use of cocaine by former Attorney General of Ontario, Michael Bryant. I, Ross Hainsworth, of the City of Toronto, make oath and say, 1. I am the applicant acting in person in this application. This is the second application I have brought for leave of a judge of this court to commence certain applications and actions pursuant to the order of Mr. Justice Cameron on June the 17th, 2004. My first application is court file number 10-397152. And on September the 7th, 2010, I swore an affidavit in that application which contains my statement how I was wrongly disbarred by the Law Society of Upper Canada. 2. The purpose of this affidavit is to outline what I know about purchases of cocaine by former Ontario Attorney General Michael Bryant before the charges against him resulting from the death of Darcy Allen Shepherd were dropped on May the 25th, 2010. Paragraph 3, in early October 2010, I attended daily at about 10 a.m. at the Tim Hortons on the south side of Eglinton Avenue West, just east of Dufferin in Toronto, to buy a coffee and read a daily newspaper. I met two middle-aged women named Yvonne Malto and Sandy Kovac, who met daily for coffee at the Tim Hortons at about this time. For October, November, and the early part of December, I shared the same table as Yvonne and Sandy, and sometimes a third woman named Loretta. We exchanged stories about our personal lives, discussed current events, and worked on the daily crosswords in the Metro News and 24 Hours newspapers. Paragraph 4. Over the course of several meetings with Yvonne and Sandy, I informed them about my case. I told them I had been wrongly disbarred by the Law Society of Upper Canada in 1995. I had been wrongly convicted of criminal charges by Justice Hamilton of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in October 2000 because he was biased in favor of the Law Society, and the benches and judges of Osgoode Hall had covered up my wrongful disbarment since 1995. Paragraph 5. I told them my case had become linked to the charges against Michael Bryant because I believe Premier McGuinty had fired Mr. Bryant from his government for refusing to appoint a lawyer for the Law Society in my Law Society discipline proceedings a few months before the incident that resulted in the death of Darcy Allen Shepherd on August the 31st, 2009. Paragraph 6. I showed Yvonne and Sandy a copy of the letter I had received from Premier McGuinty dated August the 31st, 2007, in which the Premier had ignored my complaint against Michael Bryant and suggested I continue to work with the Law Society to resolve my complaint. I said I had continued to write to the Premier, but he had never responded to my subsequent letters. Paragraph 7. After I showed the copy of the letter I had received from Premier McGuinty to Yvonne and Sandy, Yvonne said she knew that Michael Bryant was one of that high group of lawyers who purchased and used cocaine. She said there were a number of them who bought cocaine in the Belleville area. I was startled by this information, but I did not know whether to believe it or not. Yvonne had served a sentence at the Kingston Penitentiary for a drug-related offense or offenses, and I thought she might just be repeating what she had heard in the penitentiary. Paragraph 8. On February 24th, 2011, I received a phone voice message from a Gerald Guy Brummel, who had called me from a 613 area code number. I had never heard his name before. When I phoned him back, he said he wanted information about Darrell Close, a lawyer in the Ontario Ministry of the Attorney General. Mr. Brummel said he was calling from Trenton, and he was involved in a case in which Mr. Close was an opposing lawyer. He had noticed at a website that I was also involved in a case in which Mr. Close was an opposing lawyer for the ministry. Paragraph 8. I told Mr. Brummel about my case and said the entire Ministry of the Attorney General, up to and including Deputy Attorney General Murray Siegel, was covering up the sham prosecution of Michael Bryant, which I said was designed to cover up my wrongful disbarment by the Law Society of Upper Canada, and the circumstances under which Mr. Bryant had left the Ontario government. Mr. Brummel asked me if I knew the Wright brothers, who were lawyers in the Trenton area. I said the name was familiar to me because I had worked for the law firm Reynolds, Hunter, Sullivan & Klein in Belleville in 1980 and 1981. Paragraph 10. Mr. Brummel told me he knew the lawyers in the area, including the Wright brothers. He said Peter Wright had been appointed to the bench a few years ago, and he knew him quite well because he was a neighbor of his. He then told me the following story. When Michael Bryant appeared on TV the day the charges against him were dropped, an acquaintance of Mr. Brummel's said he recognized Mr. Bryant. Mr. Bryant and a dark-haired woman were together at the house of Judge Peter Wright when the judge had purchased cocaine from him. Mr. Brummel said he believed what the man told him when the man said he had cut the cocaine on the judge's piano. Mr. Brummel said he knew the judge had a piano, and when asked, the man accurately described other aspects of the interior of the judge's house. Paragraph 11, I asked Mr. Brummel if he knew this man's name and had his contact information. He said he could not remember his name, but he did have his name and address written down somewhere. I told Mr. Brummel he should speak to this man about swearing an affidavit, though it would likely be impossible to get the man to swear one. I said I would send Mr. Brummel some material about my own case, which I did later that day. Mr. Brummel gave me a Trenton mailing address. Paragraph 12. In the morning of March the 3rd, 2011, I ran into Eva Malto at the Tim Hortons. I told her what Mr. Brummel had told me over the phone on February 24. She reiterated that Michael Bryant was one of a number of lawyers and officials who purchased cocaine in the Belleville area. Yvonne said she knew of the dealer in the Belleville area who had sold cocaine to Mr. Bryant on a number of occasions. She said she knew the dealer's street name but would not give it to me without his consent. She said his first name was Paul. She said she didn't know how long Paul had been selling cocaine to Mr. Bryant, but it had been going on for a number of years. Paragraph 13, I gave Yvonne a copy of my affidavit I had sworn the day before, March the 2nd, 2011, and asked her to convey it to Paul. She said she would try to get it to him. I asked her to have Paul give me a call. To this day, I have not received a phone call from Paul. Now, this affidavit was sworn by me on March the 14th, 2011. The commissioner was an officer in the Registrar's Office of the Superior Court of Justice for the Province of Ontario. I was not cross-examined on this affidavit in the application, although there were 6 opposing lawyers to me who each had an opportunity to cross-examine me. They elected not to cross-examine me. This affidavit was ignored ultimately by Mr. Justice Sidney Lederman of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice in the hearing of the application. Now, after the application had been heard, I sent a copy of this affidavit to various public officials in Canada. A copy of it was sent to the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, Minister of Justice, the Honourable Robert Nicholson, the current Attorney General of Ontario, the Honourable John Gerritsen, the Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Dalton McGuinty, the Chief Justice of Ontario, the Honourable Warren K. Winkler, Chief Justice of the Federal Court, the Honourable Alan Lutfi, Chief Justice of Canada, the Right Honourable Beverly McLaughlin, both the past and the current commissioners of the RCMP, William Elliott and Bob Paulson, and the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Richard Fadden. To this date, December 22nd, I have not received a response to my affidavit evidence from any of these Canadian public officials. Thank you for listening to this video. This will be a first in a series of videos about various topics arising from my case. I'm a graduate of the University of Toronto Law School in 1978. I was called to the Ontario Bar in 1980. I served as legal officer in the Canadian Forces from 1987 to 1991. I was the first legal officer in the Canadian Forces to be court-martialed. as a result of my efforts to prevent the wrongful conviction of my client at a court-martial in February 1991. The topic of my next video will be the Queen's representatives lie in order to cover up for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again. Merry Christmas.